Thank you for calling the Turner Free Library's Dial a Storyline for Adults. This is The Poet and the Spider by Cynthia So. You saw the Empress once, when you were still a pillow-cheeked and blossom-mouthed child. She was tall and severe, and the train of her yellow dress flowed behind her for miles and miles, a river of pure gold. You stood behind your mother and wanted to bathe yourself in that river, and the Empress turned, her crown twinkling like a cosmos of cold stars, and she looked at you. You told everyone in your village afterwards that the Empress looked at you. It was only for a moment. Her head was briefly inclined in your direction, and then it wasn't. She kept walking. The river of gold frothed sumptuously past for hours, until at midday a woman interrupted it. She wore a black dress that spilled from her shoulders like ink. She held a brush in one hand, and in her other she held aloft the yellow fabric, on which she wrote in decisive strokes. In her wake, the river was no longer pure, muddied by dense black columns of characters. You remember sucking in a huge, trembling breath as you gaped at the woman and her clever brush, at the ink-drawn characters swimming like little black fish. She had a servant, a pillow-cheeked and blossom-mouthed child just like you, who clutched an inkstone and an inkstick and was diligently grinding more ink. Her cheeks were plumped up in concentration. She had a whole sackful of inksticks, that child. All of you stood watching the procession until the sun grew tired and drew over itself the blanket of night, and even then you did not see the end of the train. Your parents went home, but you borrowed an oil lamp from a friendly woman and sat on a low rock, mesmerized by the poem that cascaded past, your hands outstretched so that the light would fall upon it. It was impossible to read it clearly, but you caught phrases here and there, and they illuminated your heart like fireflies. When the end of the train had passed, and you were left with only the brown dirt of the empty street, you made your way home in the pallid dawn and drowned in dreams of deep pools of midnight ink, and characters that darted quicker than fish, slipping gleefully through your grasp. A herald came this morning to your village and unwound his scroll, announcing in his thundering voice that the court poet was dead, and that examinations would be held for a new court poet at the end of this year. The herald droned on about funeral arrangements and applications and eligibility and rules. You listened to all of it. You are eligible, and you will apply. You will apply. You have been writing poems for the past dozen years, ever since you saw the Empress's tour and the poem of the land. But you have spent half the day rereading some of your poems, and none of them are good enough. None of them make you feel the way that river of gold did. None of them hold the same power as the Empress's gaze, of considering something and revealing it at the same time. Your baby sister was born after the Empress's tour came to your part of the country. She never saw the poem of the land. When you used to tuck her into bed, you would whisper lines from the poem to her instead of singing lullabies. You looked at her tiny pink face that had never known the river of gold, and you pitied her. Now she is older, and she helps at your parents' shop, but you are a useless daughter, you who sit at home and write inferior poetry that will never earn any grains of rice. If you were appointed court poet, you would be able to read the poem of the land in its entirety. You would gain the keys to the palace of the poem of the land, where the river of gold is kept, where it pours from the atrium of the main entrance into the next room, and from that room to the next, until it reaches to the entrance hall again, and so on, 100 times over. You hear that each room is so wide it could contain your whole village, that there are so many rooms that one would die of thirst before making it around the complex just once. The poem took the Empress and the court poet 5 years to complete. You guess it would take you half that time to read it all. Of course, once you were court poet, you would not have the leisure to dally all day in the palace of the poem of the land. You would be busy composing the next great work. You're never going to be appointed court poet. You slump over your desk. Your mother wants you to get married to the tailor's son. In the tailor's shop there are ravels upon ravels of fabric, but none of them are yellow. That is the Empress's color, and no one else may wear it. Still, there is so much softness in the tailor's shop, and every other color imaginable, red and purple and blue and green. It wouldn't be so bad to be the tailor's son's wife. A spider scuttles across the desk, close by your nose. So close you see only a blur of too many legs. You jump up, slamming your hands down on the edge of the desk. The spider saunters, undaunted, over one of your poems, performing a graceful dance on its paper-thin legs. You have an idea. Not an idea for a poem, no, but you have an idea. In the poem of the land, you glimpsed a collection of lines that referred to the Spider Sisters of the West, who, like the Empress, are lovers of rhythm and meter and strict critics. If anyone could help you write poetry that would secure the Empress's favor, surely it would be these Spider Sisters, these connoisseurs of literature. You pack a bag and head west, leaving a couplet for your parents to explain where you have gone. You have never traveled beyond your nearest town, where you saw the poem as a small, nervous 8-year-old. You catch public wagons where you can, and where there are no wagons, you walk. You don't know how to ride a horse. As you travel, you write about the lakes and mountains you see, and the people you come across. There is the woman who has 1,000 spoons, each made of a different type of wood or metal or stone or yet other materials. One she wove from vines, another sewn silk. She claims to know the recipes for 1,000 soups, and for each recipe there is only one spoon that will stir it to perfection. There is the person who plays the guzheng so beautifully that clouds gather to listen and weep over their village whenever they pluck its trembling springs with their long fingers. You stand in the misty drizzle, listening to the way the guzheng and its player ache for each other, and understand why even the heavens are moved. You cry for loves that you have not yet loved. You reach the region where the Spider Sisters are said to live, and tiptoe into the caves with a blazing torch. You wade through webs, clutching the strap of your satchel, so heavy with the weight of all the poems you have written during your journey. There are so many caves, a maze of webs and dust and little else. You become afraid that the sprawling spread of caves may be as enormous as the palace of the poem of the land, and that you'll die of thirst before finding the Spider Sisters. You are dizzy, and the webs look like fine silver chains looping around you to shackle you and hold you fast. Out of the corner of your eye, a fearful typhoon of legs whips your heart into a frantic pounding. You whirl around to face the monster head on. Its small black abdomen and its long black legs and its multitude of black eyes. It would probably be as tall as you if it weren't elevated, poised on the web in the center of the cave, not balanced but careening, tilted toward you with all 8 legs crooked and jabbing out in furious angles. It looks as if every inch of its body is covered in thorns. Its fangs ooze venom. You swear out loud. You knew you were looking for the Spider Sisters. Somehow you had imagined them to look a little less spidery. Stupid of you, really, but they read poetry. You cannot be blamed for supposing they would more closely resemble humans. You certainly didn't expect them to regard you as their next meal. But you only caught a scattering of verses from the poem of the land. You must have missed the lines that mentioned how terrifying the sisters are. Then again, they are spiders. That should have been all the warning you needed. You have destroyed my work, the spider accuses. It's her voice crackles like the snap of dead twigs. Now that the spider has spoken, it is easier to remember that she is one of the sisters. Oh! You don't need to turn back to survey the extent to which you have ruined the network of webs that you tramped through. I'm sorry. What's that in your satchel? A thick, shimmering, tar-black drop beads and falls from her mouth like a deadly jewel. The ground sizzles. You imagine that venom burning through everything you have created, and you clutch the strap of your satchel tighter. My poems! Let's have a look. The spider indicates the space in front of her with an oddly elegant sweep of a leg. Your hand shakes as you dip into your bag and pick out a poem and lay it gently on the web, inviting the spider to stare at it with her many eyes. You wet your lips. Do you have a name? The spider doesn't answer. She looks down with her drooling mouth, but it appears to you as though she's careful not to splash the paper, her head leaning back just far enough. Her eyes flick back to you, hard and bright and ravenous. You should not talk to me when I am reading. Now her voice is haughty and high, like the clinking of wine cups. Well, what do you think? The strap is getting all twisted in your hand. It's awful. You're 20 years old, but tears well in your eyes as soon as you hear that. It would probably hurt less if she devoured you right now, slurped your soul from your body the same way you slurped a bowl full of noodles for dinner last night. But, she continues, it's not so awful that I cannot bear but to eat you right away. It happened with some other fellows who came by recently, you know. Their bodies were as dry as their poems. You don't know how, but all of the spider's eyes seem to narrow in distaste. You're here because you want to apply for the position of court poet, are you not? You nod, your throat scratchy and lungs shallow. If you want me to help you, we could make a deal. I will be your mentor from now until the examinations. If you succeed, you will not have to pay any price at all. However, if you fail those examinations, I will eat you. The spider leans so close you can smell the venom on her breath, pungent as sun-dried tangerine peel. Your stomach heaves at the sight of all those intent and hungry eyes, so near and unblinking. You try to think of the river of gold, of the Empress's gaze upon you, fleeting but startling. Here in this dark cave, with the spider's many eyes scrutinizing you, surrounded by a silver web that glitters by your torchlight, the river of gold and the Empress are distant and unreachable. Still, this is the only thing you've ever done with your life. This bag of poems is yours, and the spider hasn't eaten you. Yet. You swallow. All right. You're snatched up by the spider's legs before you can take another breath. Your torch falls from your grasp and is snuffed out. You can't see a thing. Maybe you're being eaten after all. You squeeze your eyes shut, but all you feel is the rush of air past your face, and jolts and judders as if riding a wagon along a bumpy path. You're going to be sick. You're going to be sick. You're going to be... Warmth on your cheeks, a glow behind your eyelids. You open your eyes as you're lowered to the ground, grass tickling your nape. You have to blink several times, sunlight too overwhelming after the cave. The spider looms above you, but you're outside, in the crisp, open air, and you're alive. Now that you're lying below the spider and light is plentiful, you can see that she is not black all over. Her belly is purple, and her spines mustn't be as sharp as they look. You aren't bleeding anywhere, despite being carried on a rough journey by those spiky legs. You asked for my name, she says. I am the spider of bruises and plums. You refrain from commenting upon the length of the name. Spider of bruises and plums, you say. Would you come back to my village with me? I can't travel into the human world like this, she says, and a radiant violet sphere envelops her. When the light fades, she's a young woman, like you, except beautiful, with a pale, perfect face and long, obedient hair. Her dress is diaphanous and silken, the color of her spider belly, of glossy, ripening eggplants in the summer sun, but embroidered with subtle silver stitches. There's a strangely shaped comb in her hair, a little like an eight-legged spider encrusted with amethysts, but otherwise there's no hint she's not human. Even so, when you look at her, you feel the same prickly anxiety. Shall we? She says, offering her hand to you. You take it and together pull yourself up. Her fingers are delicate as frost. That was The Poet and the Spider by Cynthia So, Part 1. For past recordings, please visit our website, www.turnerfreelibrary.org.